Hey guys, I'm Cameron Stover from huntinggeardeals.com today to talk about 6 steps for early season whitetail success. Before we get started, you need to understand early season behavior so you can capitalize on it. So, up first is bachelor groups. What is a bachelor group? So, bucks will actually group together during the early season as well as the late season into what we call bachelor groups, where you might see two, four, six, even 10 different bucks in a field together. And they will actually kind of stick together or tolerate each other more during this early season before they start to learn who's in charge and where and scope out the territories and things like that during the breeding cycle. So, we call this group of bucks bachelor groups. As testosterone levels rise, bucks will begin to disperse and find their own territories and claim these areas for their own, with the biggest, most mature deer taking the areas with the best cover. You'll see other bucks trickle in and out of the area and find their home range as well. So during this bachelor group dispersal, you'll start to see deer claim certain areas. And they start to figure out in the the pecking order, the hierarchy of who's the dominant deer. And this is done through fighting. And antler size is actually part of this process. So a lot of times bucks will see another deer's antlers and be like, I'm not messing with that guy just because he's got a big rack. But that doesn't mean that he's the most dominant deer in the area. Sometimes it's that 120-inch bully buck, 6, 7 years old, and he's walking around just pushing everybody around. And I've seen it happen. I actually seen a 6-point deer, big, mature deer, push off a booner on a property that I was hunting. He was a giant deer, but he wanted no part of fighting this deer. Actually, he didn't fight at all. He had no interest in fighting. He won his battles by looks and looks alone, whereas this bully 6-point, he claimed the best territory for himself. So as these bachelor groups disperse, you'll notice a sudden change. It'll drastically drop off to where you go from seeing on a scouting mission, or say, so I do a lot of scouting via my vehicle in the summertime, glass and bean fields, and it's a really great time to get the family involved. And you'll watch the decline in the deer numbers, even if the conditions are just right, because these bucks are starting to find areas of safety because they know what's coming. They know we're coming, but they also have that testosterone rising. The breeding cycle is approaching, and they're going to go out and look for where these does are going to be at and start planning where they're going to live. Another thing to focus on during the early season is changing food sources. So for me in southern Ohio, we've got crops of soybean and corn. As the soybeans start to turn yellow right in the beginning of September, these bucks will slowly start pulling off the beans and into the timber. Guess what happens? Acorns start dropping during this time, so the food sources are replaced from soybeans or in corn to acorns. There's nothing in the whitetail woods in my area that draws deer better than white oak acorns. If you can find an area that is producing white oaks, that is an area you should be relying on. So be alert for changing conditions or changing food sources during this time of the year, because it will happen drastically from one tree to the next. From the beans turning yellow, deer will start to pull off of it. They'll eventually return to it in the late season, and they'll find something else. Another thing, if you're in a state that allows baiting, when do a lot of people start putting bait out? Right before hunting season, right? So these deer are going to take the easiest path. A lot of younger deer are going to find those bait piles, and that's where they're going to stay. So how do you pattern deer during the early season? Well, you have to know where those deer are, and it starts with food. So for me, I'm finding a lot of deer via glassing and just driving around looking at crops. And when I can find a big mature buck to target, the first thing I'm doing is dropping a pin on OnX and trying to get permission to hunt that property. Now, it doesn't always work that way, and it's not that easy. So for me, on properties that I can already hunt, I'm taking inventory with mineral sites and bait stations, trying to figure out what deer are there. There's also other ways to pattern deer and take inventory, and one of my favorite techniques that works for anywhere throughout the country is a mock scrape. There's a lot of mistakes that you can make during the hunting season, but one of them you can't mess up. So you can get by with a lot more during the early season than you can in December. But the one thing you can't mess up on is your scent control. So make sure when you go in to hunt during the early season, whether it's opening day or whether the season's been in for 3 or 4 weeks, make sure you have the right wind and you're doing the best job you can to eliminate and control the human odor that you're putting off. There's products out there that help. Personally, I utilize a lemon shield hunt, those kind of scent control products, as well as an ozonics unit and any other opportunity that I can to decrease my scent and use it to my advantage is a good thing. Another thing to consider is the bedding areas are changing. So as deer, these bachelor groups are moving and dispersing, new bedding areas are being formed, and where those deer are bedding at is going to change drastically from the summer to the fall. So where do you think deer are going to want to bed in the summertime? Places where they can stay cool and of course safe, but they're going to want to avoid that heat. They're going to need to be close to water. So bedding areas in the fall are going to drastically change as they're looking to stay more concealed, tighter to cover, and protect themselves from predators just like you and me, other hunters as well. Also, the doe groups are going to start changing their bedding locations. So keep an eye out for these deer, these does to migrate into areas that they are going to call home most of the season. And guess what also is going to be interesting in those doe groups? Bucks. So don't be surprised if you start seeing scrapes popping up on the downwind side of these bedding areas. And these are great places to put a trail camera as well as a tree stand, regardless of whether the rut is in or not. The biggest tip that I can tell you is that patience kills bucks. What do I mean by that? Is the fact that you can make mistakes. The problem is you can't be too aggressive during the early season and push into your best spots. I'm not hunting my rut stands during the early season. I'm focused on food and food only. During this time of the year, I'm trying to eliminate the pressure that I'm putting on the deer. I'm staying out of the timber as much as possible in hopes of a deer continuing to stay comfortable on my property. I mean, I've got a 60-acre tract that I like to call home, and I don't hunt inside the timber until the end of October. I'll hunt the field edges and the field edges only, and make sure you do have the right wind. A bad wind during the early season can be very detrimental to your success throughout the rest of the season, not only during that one specific hunt. So, for more tips and for the best deals on hunting gear from across the web, visit huntinggeardeals.com and don't forget to sign up for a daily deal email so that you never miss a deal.